Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. Simon Goertzen here from Aachen, Germany, bringing you another episode of Drafting with Simon. Yeah, I'm gonna draft another Vintage Masters draft. I think that's actually one of the best limited formats designed in a long time. Kind of a bummer that you can only play it online, but I guess the reserve list has some issues with that otherwise. Alright, we're ready to draft Vintage Masters. Let's go. Rare is Volrat Shapeshifter, not as amazing. The uncommons are all fine. I like Cloud of Fairies and Storm. I like Fires of Yavimaya, but red-green is not a great color. Looking at the commons, Battle Screech is just by far the best card here. Elephant Guide is fine. You can draft green-white auras, but Battle Screech is basically the best common that makes all the white aggressive decks tick. I'm gonna take that, and I don't think it's particularly close. There isn't really anything that competes for it, and now I'm gonna, well, if possible, draft white weenies, but I'm still open towards pretty much anything. Alright, no rare here. Thopter Squadron, Yavimaya Elder, and Grizzly Fate are unexciting, I think. Grizzly Fate is certainly playable, but it's sometimes difficult to get a threshold if you are not Blue-Green Madness. And if you are, you don't necessarily want to hardcast stuff for 5 and 7 mana, but rather discard your lands instead. Akramuba is nice, Deep Analysis is nice, and the rest of the cards don't excite me too much. None of them are white cheap creatures, so that makes Battle Screech a bit worse. Noble Templar not the best to flashback here. Deep Analysis, Akramuba, and Grizzly Fate I think are the best cards. Thopter Squadron is actually better in this format than it would be in a modern limited format, simply because the creatures are a bit weaker. And having a 3/3 flyer can be quite huge. So I'm not sure what I should take here. I think it's probably still Grizzly Fate. Green-white tokens is also an archetype that's theoretically possible to draft. Green-white auras works as well, and then you get the token machine going. I think going with the power level here is the right choice. Alright, Symbiotic Worm also makes tokens to stay in theme, but it does cost 8, which is just a bit too much. Rites of Initiation is one of the best uncommons to pair with aggressive strategies. If you can attack with a couple of creatures, you just win out of nowhere. I really like Rites of Initiation in Goblins and in red-white tokens. Looking at the white cards, because there aren't really any green cards here. Solitary Emissary is a fine 2-drop, but you can get a lot of good 2-drops in this format. Devout Witness is playable, sometimes great. Deathblade Elite is the best card if you want to go green-white auras, because the provocability will allow you to just pick off creatures left and right. I'm not the biggest fan of the full-out aura deck though, because, well, you just run into cards like Repel and Radiance Judgment that punish you for it. I'm going to go with Rites of Initiation. I think it's important to stay open in the beginning, and I'm picking up powerful cards across all colors. Also, Rites of Initiation works great with both Battle Screech and Grizzly Fate, so I'm open towards any of these colors being open. Alright, none of these cards are particularly good. I think Afterlife is not very good. Giving your opponent a creature is usually not what you want to be doing. Nothing in red here, and nothing serious in green. Like I said, I'm not going to go for 8 drops. That's just not a strategy in Vintage Masters that I think works out very well. Mistmoon Griffin, Radiance Judgment, and Devout Witness are all playable. I think Devout Witness is actually the strongest of the 3, simply because it hoses Astral Slide, Lightning Rift strategies if you can get it down early, and you get to destroy some of the artifacts that players run, Suchi one of them. Mistmoon Griffin is fine, but usually you aren't out for card advantage in white anyway. I'm going to continue the theme of picking uncommons here after the first pick, Battle Screech. It's also a white creature, so I'm not going to be too unhappy to have it. And then hopefully we'll get some signals what is open. Expunge, Icarid more of a constructed card. Expunge, definitely a good black common. Fire Blast, a playable red card, but I'm not too keen on sacrificing lands, except for Goblin Trenches maybe. So Fire Blast, not really a red signal. I would take pretty much all the goblins over it. Maybe not Hulking Goblin, but that's already close. I like Solitary Emissary the best here. I haven't seen any green, and moving into black for Expunge doesn't work with any of the cards I've picked so far. Theoretically, I could go green-black value. Grizzly Fate Expunge works nicely, but the other color combinations don't really want white-black or red-black with the cards that I've drafted. I'm going to take the white card here, hoping that it's open. It is the color that's most likely to be overdrafted because of the power of the commons. But at least I get a very solid white card if it's open. Pretty late Brain Freeze and Mana War. I think Mana War is actually quite overrated in this format. Bouncing a single creature is often not what wins you the game. In some circumstances, it's absolutely amazing though. I love Brain Freeze. I think that Storm is actually quite viable, but I see that people are shying away from it. It's always also it's a gamble. If there's two people drafting it, it's really not that great. If you're the only one, I think it's one of the best decks you can draft in the format. I'm not going to move into Storm, clearly, not with pick 6 after these first picks. I'm going to go with Exile here, as it's the best white card and also pretty close in power level compared to the other cards. You don't want too many of these in your white decks, but one of them is always going to be great. This pick is between Death Grasp and Phantom Nomad. Phantom Nomad, one of the many 2-drops that you can get. You can get a Shadow creature, the guy that gains Shadow, and the Phantom Nomad, which is great with auras, because it'll just turn invulnerable. And then there's Death Grasp, which is definitely good, but would put me into white-black, basically giving me another color, the 4th color that I've drafted. Given that it's so much better than Phantom Nomad and that I'm likely to get more 2-drops, I'm going to go with power level again. Pick the Grasp here. Oh, there's also the Tapper for 2 mana. So the 2-drop slot is usually not an issue with white. The card I like the most here is Corvican Sorcerer. I think that's actually a pretty good card. Doesn't make a lot of sense to move into my 5th color though. So looking at the white cards, like I've said, I don't like Afterlife. I already have an Exile, so Afterlife even less important. Terror's Faithful is certainly a playable, and if I move into white-black, my deck might not be as aggressive as I have originally planned. And picking Scabland just to splash for Rites of Initiation or something of that sort doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm going to pick the Faithful here. Alright, all the Storm cards are wheeling, so this is definitely an archetype that somebody should be in, but I don't think it's me. So I'm going to pick cards for my white-black deck, leaving the blue to others, leaving the Storm cards to others, and Putronymt and Provoke are not really in consideration here. Foil Dark Ritual, Renewed Faith, both playable. I think that this Thopter Squadron is actually quite fine. I'm going to take it over these other cards. And another Devout Witness, not the greatest in white-black. He will never have any madness to use it with. As I've said, I still think it's actually quite playable. I'm gonna just take it. Symbiotic Worm wheeling clearly. I could hate draft Cable Ritual here. Alternatively, I take Spinal Graft, but I don't really want to Spinal Graft my creatures. So let's just take out the Ritual. I don't want the Ritual to end up with the Storm deck as well. The Storm deck has gotten enough good cards at this point. I'm gonna take Putronymt. I just don't want to put Spinal Graft on my creatures, to be honest. And this pack was pretty mediocre. I'm not even sure if I want to be black, if I want to be mono white, but I didn't really get any good white cards. I had the strategy of just picking good cards, but even with that, the power level of this is surprisingly low compared to the power level of the format. But what can you do? We have to make the best out of it. Another mediocre pack here with Shivan Worm as the rare. The uncommons not really helpful for what I'm trying to do. And even the commons don't really do much. I could pick a Deathblade Elite first without having any auras. That's just not a great pick. And in white-black, I'm missing out on the green auras that would make the Elite even better. It might still be the pick because Nightscape Familiar is not a card that I want in my white-black decks. And what else is there really? Simian Grunts, Chartooth Cougar, Obsessive Search. Yeah, none of these are remotely good or make me want to switch colors. Shivan Worm is actually quite excellent, but it's red-green. So had I started the draft with Fires of Yavimaya, maybe I would be red-green now, but haven't really seen anything in that regards. I'm just going to take the single white card in the pack, because that's the color that I want to be playing, for sure. Alright, Necropotence, Fires, another Elite. Also a second Grizzly Fate, so that's actually a consideration here. If I take a second Grizzly Fade, my late game in white-green will be really nice. I have the Witnesses to maybe get Threshold a bit earlier. And I might wheel Deathbite Lead, maybe even Elephant Guide, unlikely. But I'm at least quite likely to wheel one of the white creatures here. And moving into white-green with a kind of a weird deck that has quite a lot of late game as opposed to early game aggression. That might be the way to go here. Grizzly Fate is just really, really good. So yeah, I think that's better than taking one of the cheaper white-green cards here. I'm also now just passing the green-red. Can't move into that, I think. Wow. Survival, Route Mongol, Banalish Trapper, and a couple of other white-green cards. Also Waterfront Bouncer, Beetleback Chief. This is quite the pack. This is the first good pack that I'm seeing, basically. I could pick the Survival, but I have nothing to abuse it with. So currently it would just be a tutor for, I don't know, Terrace Faithful or something like that. So it doesn't really work in my deck so far. I think that Rat Mongol is probably the best tutor up in the format. It's just absurdly good, almost impossible to block. It changes colors, so it's safe from Exile or Expunge, and so on and so on. Wild Mongol is just insanely good. I'm going to take it here, and I have a good, reasonable chance of wheeling Brilliant Halo. Probably not the Trapper, but maybe the Halo, which would work well with white-green anyway. Wild Mongol, also another card to get Threshold with, and now, at this point, all the Madness cards become a lot better. I have the Wild Mongol and maybe one or two Devout Witnesses, depending on how my deck shapes up. I'm not a fan of Simian Grunts. You can play one of them, but I don't like to pick them early because they are really clunky. I am a fan of Armadillo Cloak, though, and I'm going to take it. That's just a really nice white-green aura, better than Armor of Thorns, and yeah, I'm happy to have that. Here, Grasslands would fix my mana. There's some cycling cards, but also a Banalish Trapper in the pack. Not really a close decision. Tapper's really good in Limited and in this format as well. Alright, this is probably decision time. Is it Simian Grunts or is it Grasslands to make my mana a bit better? I'm still looking at the Deathgrasp as a potential splash, but I can hide the other cards, which means that this is pretty much what I'm working with. Grasslands is also great to get a bit more threshold going. Every single card counts. Like I said, Simian Grunts, playable, but not really exciting. I'm going to take Grasslands here. Overall, in this format, as with every powerful limited format, in the end, you are more likely to just have too many playables. So picking up non-spells means you'll put more of your picks into your deck. This pick is between Jungle Worm and a second Deathblade Elite, where the Deathblade Elite definitely has the higher potential. I'm just going to take it. I am in white-green. Currently, I'm not a white-green aura deck by any means, but it's still likely to be better than a random 5-drop, of which I already have 3. This is going to be another Trapper, working really well with the not quite as aggressive white-green strategy that I'm going for. Second Grasslands means my mana is great. Fires of Yavimaya wheeling is pretty crazy. And then there is Deathblade Elite number 3, a first Phantom Nomad. I passed the first one. Claws of Wire would also quite nice, especially to beat the Battle Screech decks. Now that, given that I'm a Battle Screech deck, I don't really want to pick the Claws here. I'm gonna go with Phantom Nomad. I have 2 Elites already and not much to abuse them with. And Phantom Nomad is incredible with auras as well, but also quite nice without them. I'm gonna highlight the Halo here, which I was hoping to wheel. And I'm just going to explain how this Phantom Nomad works. It is a 2/2, and whenever it is dealt damage, you prevent the damage, but instead remove a counter. So it goes from a 2/2 to a 1/1 to a 0/0. Now the thing is, once it has an aura on it, for example, the Brilliant Halo, it's just going to be a 1/2, and then whenever it would be dealt damage, it's going to stay a 1/2 because there's no counters to remove. So you basically get an invincible ground creature once you put an aura on a phantom creature. And that's why I'm picking Armor of Thorns here as well. Tranquil Thicket, I don't know if it's going to make the deck, but I'm not interested in Symbiotic Worm. So, alright, Orcish Lumberjack can be a bit scary from time to time. And that rounds out pack 2. I have an Armor of Thorns, a Brilliant Halo, and an Armadillo Cloak, meaning that the 2 Deathblade Elites and the Phantom Nomad are quite a lot better than they previously were. And yeah, I'm not super excited by my deck, but at least I have a better game plan than after pack 1. I have to read this card here, Crescendo of War. In each upkeep, there's strife counters on there. Attacking creatures get rewarded, and blocking creatures... Oh, alright. And my blocking creatures are also getting better. That doesn't seem amazing. I mean, it's fine if you have a card like Battle Screech going, which is already insane, but it is a bit too symmetrical for my tastes. So it does reward the deck with more creatures, but that's not necessarily going to be mine, facing off against other Battle Screech decks or Goblin decks, for example. I actually don't like Gara's Embrace all that much, because it costs 4, so it's worse with cards like Deathblade Elite, and Regeneration is surprisingly weak in this format. You would rather have ways to protect your creatures than having Regeneration up, because there's so many clauses that it can't be regenerated, stuff like that. I like Frozen Vorine the best here. I already have the 2 elites, and the Vorine is just better with auras because it can only be blocked by a single creature. So you provoke a creature and you just kill it. It's basically the removal spell of the green-white decks. I often see it go super late, which is understandable because it's quite a weak card in most other decks. You don't even really want it in Blue-Green Madness, I guess. But I think it's one of the key cards for the green-white deck, so I'm picking it that highly. Flowstone Sculpture is a bit too expensive. Another Death Grasp. I'm not even splashing the first one from what it's looking like. I didn't get any fixing, so I'm not gonna try to make these Death Grasps work out. I'm just gonna focus on making my deck as good as possible, and I think that just means picking another Vorin here. And now I would really like to see one more Aura come my way. Alright, the Storm deck gets everything it wants. And I'm getting Shelter, Phantom Nomad, Finton Elves, or a second Exile. Now, with my deck moving into an Aura direction, it might actually be correct to take Phantom Nomad. Finton Elves is fine as well to get Frozen Vorine and Grizzly Fade out a bit earlier, but I'm actually not a big fan of it in white-green because you're usually more heavily white, and it doesn't really accelerate into your white 2-drop. So Finton Elves I'm not the biggest fan of. I think the pick is between Phantom Nomad and Exile, although I already also love Shelter. It's actually quite good with Frozen Vorine as well, so it might just be the pick here. You can usually pick one up later, but of course that's not given here. I'm actually going to take Exile. I think despite the few auras that I have, my deck will play out quite defensively, and with the Trappers I can make sure that which creatures are attacking me and which aren't. So I think 2 is a fine number of exiles to play. This pack has Assault Flats if I would still want to splash the Death Grasp, although Frozen Tusker is probably the better card to splash that with. The other cards are super unexciting. There's a Radiance Judgment, which is fine, but I have the 2 exiles already, so I'm not too interested in more removal spells. Prophetic Bolt clearly not playable for me. I'm gonna take the Tusker here. Works quite nicely with Exile in the sense that I'll have 3 mana up, and if my opponent attacks, I can Exile. If my opponent doesn't attack, I can cycle Frozen Tusker for a land and a card. That's a very late Astral Slide. Clearly not a card I can take this late in the draft. I love to first pick it, but this is just not going to happen. Still an interesting decision with the Death Grasp still here to yeah, maybe consider a splash. Also a Benevolent Bodyguard, which works just really well with all the auras. Although, to be fair, I don't have the most amount of auras. I have Armadillo Cloak as a true aura. Brilliant Halo returns, and Armor of Thorns is a card that I can play as a combat trick. So I think giving my creatures protection not as important as you would think. I'm just going to go with Death Grasp over Armor of Thorns here. No, I have to take Armor of Thorns. Yeah, I had to make a split decision there. Armor of Thorns with 2 Frozen Warriors and Deathblade Elite is just too important, I think. Alright, that said, Spirit Cairn. Whenever a player discards a card, you may play a white. And then you get Spirit Tokens. Alright, this card works with cycling. Clearly it works with cards like Wild Mongrel, but I'm not too keen on discarding too many cards. So I'm just going to take a white 2-drop here. I don't want another Faithful, and I want to be as aggressive as possible. Alright, I'm quite happy that I didn't fall for the lure of the second Death Grasp, but just tried to make my white-green deck as good as possible. Here I'm going to take Piana, a pretty easy pick over Solitary Emissary. It's great if you get it triggering, and with the auras you can make sure that it survives the attack. It's often the first target of removal, but you can't do much about that. This is between Armor of Thorns and Sudden Strength, with the armor giving you clearly a better late game and the option for turn 2 Deathblade Elite enchant. I think it's just the better choice. Alright, now I'm going to take a third Deathblade Elite because I already have 4 auras for turn 2. And that means my deck is just going to be very aggressive, green-white aura style. I'm probably going to cut most of the late game cards and not bother with the splash if I can help it. I could play a Swamp and the Goertzen Tusker to support the Death Grasp, but the question is if the amount of playables works out in the end, if I still want to play all these Elites and Armor of Thorns. I'm also a bit concerned about the Grasslands now, because I really want to have the turn 1 Plains, turn 2 Forest. Shelter is a great pickup, actually pretty amazing with all the auras. Like I said, I'm not too interested in tapped lands, so I might pass on the Tranquil Thicket and pick Gilded Light instead to have an answer to the Storm deck. I think that's the more powerful option here. A great late Bodyguard. I was kind of hoping for that, but if there's another white drafter, you usually don't get the Bodyguards that late. So that's actually a great addition to my deck. At least it looks like I'm in the right colors. I could take Provoke here, but I think Provoke is just not a great card. Alright, this worked out better than expected, given that pack 1 was kind of lackluster. But I'm quite happy where I ended up. I think that this deck definitely has a lot of potential. I also have at least 3 lands here. Clearly I need to cut a lot of cards, but I think I'll be able to do that. I can cut a few of the creatures. I can maybe go down on the exiles now that my deck is so aggressive and has the Deathblade Elites to deal with creatures. And then I will have to decide on the late game. Maybe only going for the Grizzly Fates as the big trump in the late game. Although I like Thopter Squadron as a solid flyer as well. Alright, let's see how this works out. Like I said, probably not playing the Death Grasp. I think my mana is not really great to support it. And then I'd rather just have a good white-green deck. Although I'm kind of keen on playing the Grasslands, I think it's just too easy to lose games in this format because you don't have the right amount of mana. So yeah, the big question is really how to play this. With 17 creatures, but also a Battle Screech and 2 Grizzly Fate, I'm definitely running too many creatures right now. And I also have kind of a not a really streamlined choice of spells here. I have the auras and the protection spells, but also the 2 exiles and the Goertzen Tusker, which are defensive and late game oriented, which doesn't really work in my deck, because that's just not what I want to be doing. Also, Terror's Faithful is quite the controlling card. I think the best choice is just to take out the defensive cards and rely on Grizzly Fate for the late game, if it ever comes to that. I could also see cutting a Devout Witness, although I kind of like having a lot of creatures in a deck with so many auras. I need to do something early on, and Devout Witness is certainly not horrible. It also makes Grizzly Fate better, as I said earlier. So I'm going to play at least one, also because of my curve, the lack of 3-drops. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to run both of them. If I cut the Faithful and just all the late game cards for now, then I'm still at 26. I added the Thopter Squadron, but clearly I still need to cut down on some of the creatures here. I don't need to run Sudden Strength with 3 Armor of Thorns giving me Combat Trick and Aura at the same time. And I want to always run the shelter with, if all my other cards are, if all my other non-creatures are auras, I need the shelter. It's just a very important piece of the puzzle here. I have the true trappers, so I'm not too concerned about not having enough removal. And judging by this, I could cut the Thopter Squadron and run only 16 lands because my mana curve is actually quite low. And I'm not sure what I should cut if I want to run 17 lands. If I want to run 17 lands, I think it's either a Grizzly Fate or one of the Devout Witnesses, because they are just not as amazing. This could actually work, with the lack of 3-drops being a bit compensated by the fact that I'm just going to have 1 and 2 drops to play more of them than you would think. Also, if I play the Grasslands, I could play a Grassland on turn 3 and then have a 2-drop ready. I think this could actually work. And like I said, I'm going to run the Grasslands. I think they're just too important not to run. And Tranquil Thicket, I think, is fine as a tapped land because it's a green one anyway. So if it was a white one, I wouldn't run it because I want the white on turn 1 and 2, very importantly. But the green often can wait a turn. And just having the Cycler with the 17 land deck will hopefully make my Grizzly Fates a bit better as well. So I'm just running all of these. I don't want to lose to getting mana screwed, and that allows me to do that. So with 17 lands and 2 Grasslands, I'm gonna have 19 sources total, and I clearly want more white ones, and at least 7, 8-ish green ones. So 8, 11 would be an option, meaning that I would have to add, let's see, 5 forests and 9 plains. Let's see if that's too many white sources. That's 6, 8 green, and then it should be 11 white. This looks like a pretty good mana base to me. I'm still quite likely to cast my green spells, and there's only a single double green spell. And with the white, I have the Piana, the Battle Screech, but also importantly, the 2 Trappers. So I really want the white mana. Also Devote Witness if I ever want to activate it. So also Deathblade Lead. So many white activations. Oh wait, all of my white cards have white activations basically. So, or are double white. So having a lot of white sources is clearly important here. With only 5 forests and the rest either cycling or getting me white sources, I think I should be fine with this setup. I really like my deck. The real question is how aggressive I can play this, or sometimes I'll have to just take it a bit slower, maybe play up to a big turn where my auras come down. This is going to be interesting, and I still have pretty nice late game with the 2 Grizzly Fates. Oh, I think I accidentally cut a card. Yeah, sometimes I click around too much. All right, that's it. Let's see how that goes.